Welcome back, everybody, to It's Called Football, as we bring you all the details that occurred over last weekend in Matchday 6 of the Premier League. Some of our earlier fixtures from this match day saw Fulham travel to Crystal Palace in a London derby, then Luton Town hosting Wolves in what they would hope would be the opportunity to pick up their first Premier League points. City then hosted Nottingham Forest, while Everton traveled to Brentford in hopes of getting their first win on the board in this season. And then Manchester United traveled to Burnley in hopes of fixing up their form, which has been patchy of late, to say the least. Crystal Palace and Fulham ultimately had nothing between them. In fact, there was no one that even found the net between either of those two sides. Luton Town, much to the delight of their fans and players, did manage to pick up their first point, although it did come in slightly controversial fashion. Wolves did take the lead, despite being a man down, having had one of their players sent off with a red card earlier in the match. But Luton Town did equalize via a penalty, although the controversy was that perhaps the penalty kick shouldn't have been awarded. There's still some debate going on about that. Manchester City, in all truth, were probably expected to have a bigger margin of victory against Nottingham Forest. Uh, 2-0, however, got the job done and probably remained that way because a Manchester City player received a red card in the second half, which would have obviously led to them being a little more safe in their play rather than trying to push for more goals and risk getting caught on the counter attack. Brentford were surprisingly poor in their home match against Everton, and Everton showed that their quality will capitalize if presented with enough chances. They did come away with a 3-1 win, fully deserved, and they will be thrilled to have their first win of this Premier League season, which now moves them out of the bottom three spots in the league table. More on that a little later. Burnley were quite unfortunate actually to lose this match to Manchester United. They hit the woodwork, which denied them a goal, and they dominated possession against United, which was very surprising actually, because you would expect Manchester United to be fairly comfortable in matches against teams who played the way Burnley have so far this season. But it does perhaps show a little bit of how Manchester United still have lots of work to do, because while they might have come away with the victory thanks to a bit of real skill from their captain, Bruno Fernandes, Burnley had about 75% of the possession, I think just under that, and United need to do a lot more if they're hoping to control games and really get victories more comfortably. Our other fixtures on match day 6 saw Arsenal take on Tottenham, Brighton take on Bournemouth, and then Chelsea hosting Aston Villa, while Liverpool welcomed West Ham to town, and then Sheffield United welcomed Newcastle. And our results in these fixtures saw Arsenal and Spurs play out a very exciting, goal-filled, but ultimately stalemate, with sharing 1 point apiece and both teams maintaining their undefeated starts to the season. Brighton, as expected, had a fairly routine win against Bournemouth by 3 goals to 1. Chelsea's poor form continued as Aston Villa managed to win at Chelsea for the second successive season. Liverpool also managed their good form with about 6 wins in a row in all competitions now, 5 wins in a row in the Premier League, as they beat West Ham United, who have now had two defeats back to back, one against Manchester City last week and one to Liverpool this week, both by scores of 3-1. And then in what was one of the stunning performances of the season so far, and maybe the 2020s altogether. Newcastle United went to Sheffield United and dismantled them 8-0 in a unbelievably dominant showing this season and really displaying to everyone how much attacking talent their squad possesses. So where does that leave us in the league table? Well, Manchester City maintain their perfect start, 6 wins out of six, a very nice goal difference of plus 13, and a 2 point lead on just one side now in Liverpool because Tottenham and Arsenal have both dropped more points. Brighton's fifth win of the season has propelled them up to third place now, where they sit on 15 points, and Tottenham and Arsenal are right behind, 14 points each. Tottenham slightly better on goal difference. And the four teams that were unbeaten before this match day began remain unbeaten, although Tottenham and Arsenal will both feel a little hard done by as both had opportunities to win their match against each other. Liverpool seem to be going through a resurgence after a poor season last year. They seem to be back and contending with Manchester City at the top. It remains to be seen whether Arsenal, Spurs, Brighton, or other sides can pick up enough points and catch up with those two teams because Man City and Liverpool were kind of the two that contended for the title over the majority of the last 5 or 6 years, aside from last year where Liverpool fell away early in the year. Uh, Aston Villa's win at Chelsea has brought them further up the table as they sit in sixth place in a very healthy spot. Their goal difference isn't amazing right now, but their points tally is. And Newcastle and Manchester United's victories this weekend have brought them back into the top half of the table. As a result, Crystal Palace slipped down a little bit, and some of the other sides that were in the top half for the last couple of weeks have now just slightly slipped into the bottom half. Bottom half, we see that Fulham and Nottingham Forest, who were sitting in the top half last week, have just dipped below that halfway point at the moment. Nothing to worry about as they are still ahead by several points on the teams at the very bottom. Brentford have slipped down a couple of places. Chelsea's defeat, their third of the season already out of their 6 games, has left them now in 14th place, just as they were last week, and falling further behind the rest of the top teams in the league. There's so much concern right now at Chelsea, and they have now not scored in their last 3 league games. They have only scored a total of 5 goals in their 6 league matches so far, and 3 of those came in one match against Luton Town, who have been sitting in the bottom three the entire season so far. Everton's big win at Brentford, which finally gave them a 1 in the win column there, has got them out of the bottom three and sitting up in 15th place at the moment. Wolves are sitting right where they were last week, and Bournemouth have slipped down a little bit after their defeat against Brighton. Luton Town getting their first point, uh, combined with Burnley's defeat by 1 goal, means that on goal difference, Luton have now jumped up 2 places and sit in 18th. All 3 teams that were promoted last year from the Championship are occupying the bottom 3 spots in the Premier League right now. Not a great look at the moment for the quality on display by those 3 sides, but there's a lot of the season still to go. 4 teams remain that are looking for their first win of the season, and probably understandably, all 4 of those sides occupy the bottom 4 spots of the table. Sheffield United, who were sitting higher up the table before, purely because of the margin of their defeat to Newcastle, are now sitting at the bottom of the table on goal difference. Very worrying at the moment because when you fall behind that much and teams see that you can be beaten by that margin, even more sides are going to feel confident attacking you and trying to make sure they build up their own goal differences when they face you. So that might be a bit of a concern for Sheffield United, and they will want to take care of damage limitation in their next fixture. Some of the big moments from this match day, and there were quite a few. So, first of all, huge congratulations to Luton Town for their first ever Premier League point. It may have come from the spot, but a goal is a goal nonetheless, and a point is a point. Probably the biggest mental hurdle is as a new team in the league, especially in a division as difficult as the Premier League. The most difficult thing is mentally to try and make sure you get that first point and eventually your first win of the season. For Luton and all the hardships they've faced and this incredible story they've been on where they've propelled themselves up through the different divisions. There might have been a little bit of pressure internally from the players on themselves, from the manager on himself to get a result, especially as more and more games went by and Luton weren't getting any points out of it and were getting beaten left, right, and center. Wolves obviously did have a man sent off, but ultimately they can't complain. And Luton kept battling and earned themselves a point. They will be ecstatic about that. Their fans will have been delighted that that point came at home. And hopefully we get to see Luton continue building on this. It would be a real fairy tale story if they managed to stay up this season in the league, given how restricted they are financially compared to other sides. We will talk about that more later. West Ham might have lost to Liverpool, but their star man at the moment, Jared Bowen, the Englishman, has now scored in four consecutive away matches for the club, which is a record at the moment for West Ham. He has broken the club record there, as no player in West Ham's history before managed to score in four consecutive away matches. Three has happened before, but Bowen is now standing alone at the top of the pile for this record at least. He'll be delighted about that, and West Ham will be thrilled that they have at least one attacker who consistently is getting output right now when they are not at home. Manchester City, Rodri is usually a very calm midfielder. He controls games almost effortlessly. He scored the winning goal for City in their victory in the Champions League a few months ago. But this was a moment of madness as he laid his hands on Morgan Gibbs White of Nottingham Forest and earned himself a straight red card. Although City did go on to win the match anyway, and they were ahead at the time when this incident happened. The bigger concern right now for City is that Rodri receiving a straight red means that he is now going to miss the next three domestic matches, which includes one cup match in this midweek against Newcastle, but then he also misses league fixtures away to Wolves, followed by another away fixture to Arsenal. And that is going to be potentially a big miss for Man City, assuming that Arsenal also have their entire squad available for that match. Over to another team in blue, though. Dominic Calvert-Lewin starred off the bench as a substitute and scored a third goal for Everton as they deservedly ran out 3-1 winners at Brentford. Uh, for anyone who managed to watch that game, you could see how much it meant to uh, the man that affectionately everyone calls DCL. And after all of his injury problems and getting back to fitness, it was truly a great sight to see him celebrating and to see him happy as he helped Everton register their first victory of this season. He will be hoping that he can keep going from strength to strength and lead Everton to more victories so that hopefully they're not in a battle to stay in the league by the time we get a few more months into the season. Another team in blue, although with fortunes on the other side of the spectrum, Chelsea are struggling at the moment. They aren't conceding tons of goals, it has to be said, and they are actually creating excellent chances. Probably the best team at the moment for creating clear chances apart from Manchester City. However, they are not converting these chances. And at the moment, huge discussions need to be had within the club to figure out what exactly they need to do to get things right because they have the players, they've spent a lot of money, close to £1 billion, if not more, and yet their players, they don't look confident. Their system looks a little disjointed at times, and they're getting undone by goals here and there, which are just narrowly beating them, but beating them nonetheless. To lose 50% of their league matches this early into the season is something that Chelsea fans have not experienced for a long time, and the club themselves haven't experienced this in years. So this is something that they're going to have to figure out, and at the moment, I'm not sure where exactly the solution is. They don't have tons and tons of injuries. They do have a few injuries, but they also have enough quality players that should be able to step up and get them results. And at the moment, they simply aren't doing it. And finally, we have the big story. Like we said, what you can see there on the far left is the goal times for Newcastle and the goal scorers. Newcastle United set a record here, not for the margin of victory, because the Premier League has seen bigger margins than 8-0. But what they did set a record for is that actually every goal was scored by a different player. You can see here by the timings and by the goal scorers that Newcastle United became the first Premier League side to have 8 different goal scorers for them in a single match in the Premier League. Incredible by them, really showcases their talent. And given that a couple of their goals came from defenders, this is a warning sign to the rest of the league as to the threat that Newcastle pose when they're on the attack, whether it's from open play or from set pieces. But excellent by Newcastle, and they will really be hoping to build on this performance when they play Manchester City in the League Cup this midweek. Obviously, the biggest story that we were expecting before this weekend was the North London derby, as we spoke about in our preview. And Arsenal versus Tottenham almost never, ever, ever lets you down. It's always a heated fixture. The rivalry is so intense between fans and players, and this one was no different. Initially, Arsenal were dominating proceedings. They created chances. They just were not clinical enough in putting them away. Otherwise, they could have been out of sight and had the victory wrapped up before half time. As it stood, Bukayo Saka put Arsenal ahead on 26 minutes. And unfortunately, at that point, Arsenal, for some reason, inexplicably decided to take their foot off the gas right when they should have kept on pushing to try and drive the nail there in the Tottenham coffin, so to speak. They let their foot off the gas. They eased up a little bit. Tottenham sensed it and they grew back in the game. Uh, and ultimately, James Maddison and Heung-min Son for Tottenham were instrumental. Saka actually was responsible for both Arsenal goals, while Son, helped by Maddison, scored both of Tottenham's goals. Very, very disappointing for Arsenal, and Tottenham will be thrilled, absolutely, because they don't usually get a result at Arsenal. And it must be said, generally, Arsenal don't get a result away at Tottenham. So this will be a huge boost for Tottenham to have come away with a point here. And although it must be said that it wasn't necessarily just Tottenham's quality that got them back into this game, a key factor was Declan Rice having to go off with a minor back injury in the second half. And the moment he went off, the control changed in midfield, and Tottenham were able to grow into the game. The other thing was a very strange mistake from a usually calm figure in Jorginho. Jorginho, who came on to try and steady the ship when Rice was subbed off, weirdly made a mistake, a lapse of judgment, and he held on to the ball too long. He got robbed by Tottenham players, who then immediately scored Tottenham's second goal to equalize after Arsenal had just gone ahead a couple of minutes before. So for Arsenal, the concern here is that at home they seem to give away silly goals due to errors, lapses in concentration, just individual mistakes, and this dates back to last season as well. It is definitely a concern because Last season, at least, Arsenal were creating countless chances and they were probably being more clinical in putting them away. This season, Arsenal aren't creating chances as easily or as regularly, which means that when they do put their chances away, they need to make sure that they cut these errors out of their game, and they haven't quite done that yet. It is definitely a concern, and it's something that manager Mikel Arteta will want to reinforce to them. Because at the moment, it's possible that the emotions associated with playing at home are impacting this young Arsenal side, and he will want them to learn how to be calmer and control games more effectively because that's not happening at the moment. But like we said, the Tottenham fans and the players and the manager, credit to them really. They played very well, and to come away with a point at a ground where they usually get beaten is excellent for them. The same as it was for Fulham when they came to the Emirates um, back in August. But disappointing for Arsenal, morale boosting for Tottenham. But at the end of the day, both sides remain unbeaten, and that is a positive that both teams can take away from this. Absolutely. So how did we do with our predictions? For anyone who watched our Matchday 6 preview, these were the scores that thought might happen from the games. For Palace and Fulham, I did expect goals, and I thought a Palace win would happen, but ultimately ended up being a little bit of a quieter fixture with a nil-nil draw and points shared. I did think Wolves had enough in them to beat Luton, and given that they went ahead, even though they had a man sent off, perhaps they might have done that were it not for the penalty call that managed to tie the game to Luton. But credit to Luton Town, and I'm happy that they finally got a point on the board. Manchester City have given away a cheap goal every now and then, but at the moment, it this game obviously because of the red card was impacted a little. And so we saw just a 2-0 victory. On another day, I think we probably would have seen something close to that 4-1. Brentford and Everton actually went in reverse. On your average day, I would have said that Brentford would have won this game. And I think if they were playing on top form, they probably would have won it. But credit to Everton to take the game to Brentford. They played very well. I watched the match and they fully earned their victory. They deserved it. Burnley and Manchester United, I guess I got the margin right. Excuse me. I got the margin right, I guess, that United would win by a single goal. Perhaps I overestimated both sides a little bit in terms of their goal scoring prowess, but United did come away with a one goal margin victory and a little bit undeserved, but United do have quality players, and that's what you can do when you have quality players. They can bail you out of games, even when you might not necessarily have been playing to deserve them. Arsenal and Spurs. Sadly, I was really hoping I would be wrong about this, and I was really hoping, like when Arsenal traveled to Everton last weekend, that Arsenal would manage to pull it off. And this happened to be, I guess, a step too far. They have had great results so far this season. They beat Manchester United before the international break, then beat Everton last week, and then a great win in the Champions League in midweek. It is possible that they put a lot of energy into that Champions League match, and that's impacted their performance a bit because Arsenal were off their game. They didn't control it as much as they usually do. And from a fan perspective, I'm a little disappointed to have been right, but it was kind of what I saw coming. I wasn't off by too far in Brighton's match against Bournemouth. Brighton just need to get a little more clinical and score that extra goal so that my prediction's spot on for them next time. Chelsea and Villa turned out to be a more cagey affair than I thought. I thought there was going to be a little more open with goals for both sides, but again, guess I overestimated Chelsea a little bit. Villa, credit to them for taking the game there, not showing any fear, and deservedly coming away with the win. Liverpool have looked impressive this season, as have West Ham, but Liverpool at home are a beast that very few sides are able to deal with. And I kind of saw this 3-1 win coming because Liverpool have leaked a goal now and then in their games this season, but they generally do tend to score quite a bit more, as was the case here. I think if you'd asked me for a year, I would not have been able to predict the score of the last match. I did think Newcastle would have a controlled victory. I didn't see anything coming like this 8-0 demolition that actually ended up happening. But hey, I got the 0 goals for Sheffield right, so I will take that. That is where we're going to leave you for today. Slightly longer video, I know, but we went into details because there were quite a bit of stories from this past weekend of Premier League football. Um, we will be back very soon with a Matchday 7 preview. But for any of you that are able to watch, we have some League Cup action in midweek. There were some games today, and there will be some games tomorrow before the Premier League resumes on the weekend again. But we will talk to you again very, very soon. And until then, take care. Please like the video if you enjoyed this and share it and subscribe to the channel. Your support means a lot as we're trying to grow this channel and it's still in early days. Uh, but take care of yourselves and remember, it's called football.